Yeah, hey, this is a blind guy doing stuff, and today we're going to do a little talking. I was reading around on Facebook, looking around, and today we're going to kind of discuss a topic I don't really like to get into and don't really like to talk about too much, as most people probably don't, and that would be the death penalty. And I bring this up because there was a recent case over the weekend of a man getting killed in Alabama by the state of Alabama, killed a man, murdered him. And apparently it was by lethal injection, and there were some problems with putting him to sleep, and he was convulsing and coughing and carrying on. And some of the headlines read, inmate tortured to death in Alabama. So, I wanted to talk about it for a second because passions run so high on this topic. Um, First of all, let's talk about the death penalty, just the pure facts real quick. Um, the fact is that majority of people put to death in the United States and around the world are of minority groups. If you're white in America, and you murder somebody, you're more likely to get life in prison than if you're black and you kill somebody, you murder somebody. Then, so most of the time, it's African Americans and minorities going to the death penalty. Also, you just can never you never know if you're going to predict somebody that or convict somebody that's innocent. And the likelihood of doing that is pretty high because people are very fallible, as we know. People make mistakes, so the court system is made up of people, so there's going to be mistakes. So you cannot just get away from, oh, we might have killed somebody who was innocent, and that's a heavy cost for the state to carry. And another problem with the death penalty is um, the cost of it. It is a huge cost on our coffers. Um, it always kind of amazes me. People who are for small government are usually always for the death penalty. Conservatives, oh yes, we're for the death penalty, but the government spends way too much of our money. And by the way, the government can't do anything right. The government can't even regulate a wetland correctly or tell people where to build an oil pipeline correctly. They can't do that. They cannot regulate that. They are no good at it. Get rid of them. Shut them down. We're small government conservatives. But this one thing, oh, well, this state who can't do anything else right can put people to death right. That just doesn't really make any sense, and it's not very consistent. Um, so anybody who is for small government should be anti-death penalty, just for the fact that giving the state so much power is goes against goes against our Constitution. And you have to know that people who broke away from England back in the early 1700s, when everything started getting going and breaking away from England, our country, one of the things probably was the death penalty. I read a history of the kings not too long ago, leading up to the about 1637 when the Georges took over, and there was just death penalty. England was nothing but like a killing ground. They just round people up and murder them and torture them, and death penalty all over the place. So a lot of those people fled during that time in Charles II time, I believe, over to Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims and everything because they just wanted to get away because England was a killing ground. So we don't want to give the state that much power to kill people. Um, and also, life in prison just seems a way worse punishment than putting somebody to death. A lot of times, people who are on death row or kill somebody, they might want to die anyway, so you're sort of doing them a favor. Um, I personally know someone who was put on death row in Alabama. I can't even fathom if the state would have had to torture him to death and having his family and his friends. We all have to, live through that, seeing that happen. But he actually committed suicide on death row. So putting him to death um, did him a favor. And I think he would have been much better served to have him secure so he couldn't commit suicide, and that he would still be serving life in prison, rehabilitating himself and thinking about trying to make amends for what he did. And I also know somebody in prison for life in prison, and best I can tell, they're pretty miserable fellas. So, um, life in prison is no joke. So, and doesn't cost as much as the death penalty. I mean, and the only reason you can really get people that are pro death penalty, well, there's a couple, but the biggest one is vengeance is mine. People want to take revenge. Oh, you wouldn't want them to be my family, or I'd kill them. They wouldn't even make it to the court. That's the big thing you always hear. Oh, I'd come up and kill them myself. Well, that's not very. Then you'd be a murderer too. Um, so the vengeance part, that's a big part of the death penalty, and the eye for an eye. That's the thing. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He killed somebody, so we have to kill them. Well, I hate to tell you this, and I hate to kind of bring this to your attention. If you're one of these people, the eye to the eye people, your enemy ISIS, they get their idea of death penalty probably from that very same scripture in the Old Testament, or writings very similar, came from the same region of the world that said eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So you walking around with your death penalty beliefs, you are right there with ISIS. It probably comes from the very same morality. And so you possibly need to examine, we hate all this going over on the Middle East. ISIS is putting people in cages and torturing them and soldiers, but Alabama's torturing people, and putting them to death. So we really need to look at the morality of this. And then the other reason I've heard for the death penalty is, some crimes are just so heinous that we have to put people to death to sort of set an example. I don't really buy that one either, because look at people like Gary Ridgway, a super serial killer that was from around here in Washington State, who is serving life in prison. And then also look at other serial killers who were not put to death on death row. Because again, most of the time, if you're white, then you're going to get life in prison rather than death row. So we just need to put an end to the death penalty nationwide. I believe a conservative state that recently did it was Nebraska. Washington State, they just weren't going to put people to death. And it's us as humans, and even myself who is anti-death penalty, when you hear people murdering somebody or something like that, the first instinct is to say, oh, well, let's put them to death. But I would encourage people to pause and then think about some of the things that I've said today and really re-examine the belief in the death penalty in the United States. I'm the blind guy doing stuff. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you do, I'm going to be making a lot of these videos on current events and different things I do. So hit subscribe and kind of keep up with my feed here. Hope everybody has a good day, and bye-bye.
Studio mode chat. Stop recording button.